Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi says the Independent Examinations Board and the National Senior Certificate should be merged in order for learners to write the same exam. Lesufi says that private and public school learners should be treated equally, receive the same quality education and write the same papers during exams. To discuss this subject, we are now joined by Senior Lecturer at the Science and Technology Education at University of Johannesburg, Dr. Thamsai Dhurumraj-Bhadree, as well as NAPTOSA's Executive Director, Basil. Manuel. The Premier of Gauteng Panyaza Lesufi was supposed to join this panel, but unfortunately his phone is off. We are hoping that he will be able to join us a bit later on during this discussion. We also request that the largest and the oldest membership organizations for private schools, known as the Independent Schools Association of Southern Africa, SABC, to comment, but they were not available after initially agreeing to a pre-recorded interview with us on this particular subject. But we're going to continue with the conversation and love to hear your input on this as well. Basil, good morning. Let's start off with you. What do you make of this proposal being made by the Premier?
Good morning, Aldrin, and thanks for having me, and good morning to Thamsai as well. Aldrin, simply put, NAPTOSA's view is it's not unhealthy to have a debate about these things, and certainly it's not unhealthy to reflect on our education system and the things that make it work, alternatively not. I don't believe necessarily that it will fly in the end, and maybe it's a straw dog given the time we are in. But NAPTOSA will certainly be participating vigorously in the debate about this. We also do feel that the curricula should be the same. If you want to judge people, and people judge the public education system very easily, but it's of course comparing a flea to an elephant when you look at the 800,000 matriculants versus the 15,000 matriculants. And that's where differences come in. But we're happy with the debate and we'll participate in it. And of course, our members will guide us soon about the direction that this must take.
Yeah. But what's your take on it though? Do you agree with the Premier that there are problems and those problems need to be fixed, and we should, because yesterday I was speaking to the Premier actually on SAFM, and the sense that I got from him was that they're only speaking about the exit examination, which means the grade 12 examination. And one of the questions that I had for him, but what happens at the grades below grade 12? Shouldn't those also be something that needs to be focused on if we're speaking about one exit examination?
Aldrin, I'm not unhappy with the suggestion like that. However, that is not my union's guidance at this stage. This call was made recently, and as a member-driven organization, we've got to go and test it. But I can tell you, there will be pushback. I can tell you there will be many different views about constitutional issues, etc. But I do believe if we want to judge people, we must use the same yardstick to judge them.
Yeah. And Dr. Thamsai, your take on this proposal?
Good morning to the viewers and good morning, Basil. You know, it's not as simple as we agree or no, we don't agree. There are a number of factors that have to be taken into account. And like Basil is saying, if we are to make a judgment, we have to judge fairly. And, you know, being 30 years into democracy, how do we achieve equity and equality? You cannot have equality without equity. There has to be fairness. Yep. So, you know, in my view, in my opinion, this is a good debate to have. And, you know, it is discussions that should take place because, yes, children need to be assessed in the same manner. There needs to be fairness, you know. And then if we are talking about the lower grades, you know, you view it, and I like to use the analogy of when you build a house, you have to have a strong foundation. Yeah. And we need this foundation to be very strong from the very beginning. And if that happens, then the comprehension skills and the issues that relate to comprehension skills can be eliminated to an extent. But, this is not a simple, yes, let's change, or no, we should not change. It requires a concerted effort. It requires discussions from various stakeholders. Therefore, we can say, yes, let's go ahead, because there are a number of factors that need to be taken into account. Yeah. But ultimately, we are in a democracy. We're 30 years in a democracy. So in my view, every child writing that exit level exam should be writing the same exam if we want to make a fair comparison.
Yeah, okay. Dr. Thamsai, right now, what's the difference between the exam that's written by the public schools compared to the exam that's written by the IEB, and who is disadvantaged from this dual system?
So if we look at the IEB examination, obviously that's pitched more at an international level. And if we want to say that then our South African curriculum is of an equivalent standard, then we need to review curricula. So right now, those children that are engaging in the IEB exam, they would obviously be at a slightly higher advantage in terms of the curricula they are engaging with, because obviously it is more intense and it is pitched at a higher level compared to the NSC curricula.
Yeah. And Basil, your take on that, because the Premier was saying as well that sometimes what would happen when he compares the two examinations is that with the IEB examinations, that's what he refers to as the hard or difficult questions, is that you'll have around 40% of those in an IEB examination, whereas with the public system, with the National Senior Certificate, you'd have around 20% of these so-called hard questions. What does that then do to how people perceive the IEB versus how they perceive the National Senior Certificate, including how universities also view them?
Aldrin, I think we need to make a few points. At first, we mustn't create the impression that everything about the IEB exams is superior to the public examination system. It's not true. And in fact, there are a large number of top private schools that write the examination of the public education system, of the DBE. We also know that both systems have to be quality assured by the same quality assurer, that is Umalusi, to ensure that they both are attaining a similar outcome and that they are both being equivalent as an exit. That having been said, there are differences. There are differences in the quality of papers. There are differences in the stratified levels of questions and things like that. And when Premier Lesufi makes the call, I'm sure he has certain things that he is particularly concerned about, which we haven't yet seen. And it is to those that we will also react. But there are things that we want to bring to the table as well in a debate like this. But we mustn't oversimplify the debate. We know that there are different levels. The one is just about the curriculum. We all use the same core curriculum, but from the core we extract different things. We also know that what has been extracted we need to evaluate, and we need to also see that both exam systems are in fact going in the same direction, so that the pupils who exit from those exams are at a particular level. If they're not, then obviously we're running two very different systems. But it is true that people automatically assume that because it's private, it must be better.
Yeah.
It is not true. Some of the private schools are doing really, really crazy things, as well as public schools. We need to look at all those things. But if you want to compare, you've also got to look at infrastructure. You've got to look at the quality of what is there, like laboratories and the like. You can't simply just make a blind comparison and assume that that'll be okay.
Basil, does standardizing the exit examination means that you lower the standard that you have with the IEB examinations to try and be at the level of where the basic education's National Senior Certificate is at?
Definitely not. And this is the problem, Aldrin, that I'm having. Even the question suggests that there's an automatic assumption that the one is superior to the other. Is it? And that is what we need to test. And we need to test that by looking at a variety of things. I'm saying as NAPTOSA, we haven't done that comparison closely enough to make a determination. But what we do know is that we are not comparing apples with apples.
Okay, and Dr. Thamsai, your take on that, because standardizing also, as it has been pointed out, as both of you have now pointed out, the issue around resources and the availability of resources, that sure, you have a standardized exit examination. However, again, going back to what happens below grade 12, is all the resources that have been invested in, for instance, in a private school versus the resources that have been invested in a public school would not be the same. So the base already is not the same.
Well, absolutely. You know, there's vast differences that are going to come into play. But again, it is about quality. Nobody says that you have to have a computer in front of you to teach skills of literacy in terms of digital literacy. And, you know, as teachers, our teachers improvise. And I can tell you that the quality of teachers that come out from all public universities and private HEIs that are out there, they are quality teachers because the programs are all passed through to the same accreditation bodies before they can be, processed to these students. And it's all about being skillful. Yes, we are in a country where there are vast differences, but how do we, I think what the question needs to be asked is, how can we change this? How can we make the best out of the worst situation that we're facing? And it is not impossible. It requires creativity, it requires critical thinking. And these discussions need to happen because we can't keep saying we want it to change, but we need the money for it to change. Let's try to make the change with what we have. And it involves various stakeholders coming to the party and just being innovative about this.
Okay. Basil, let's come to you now on this. The question around teachers and the quality of those teachers. The Premier again makes an example of a school that he says a public school where the class there or the grade, one grade received 100% in economic pass rate. The teachers were then poached by Curo. Unfortunately, Curo then was able to offer them an additional 5,000, which the basic education system cannot offer. How then do you deal with that particular issue? Because again, the private schools are able to attract the best talent amongst teachers.
Aldrin, and I don't think that's a problem that is going to be easily solved. It will always be that those who have more money can offer more incentives and attract people. It is common that we find that schools poach one from the other. In fact, it even happens that within the public education system, you find a teacher in, let us call it a former HOR or HOD school, gets poached by one from one of the Model C schools because they are top and they offer them other incentives that your ordinary public school can't do that. This is common, and it's even more common between your public schools and your private schools. I don't think, even if you have the same examination system, even if you have the same exit exam, that is going to stop. What they are using is the power of economics to attract the best to them. Remember, the teachers coming out of our universities are all trained by the same people. They are the same group of teachers. So you will always have, even within that group, a better teacher and a weaker teacher. But teachers are built. They are also developed in the context in which they find themselves. And when you're sitting with 60 kids, you are not going to develop in the same way as if you're sitting with 20 kids. Those are some of the realities. And take that teacher that had 60 kids, put them in a class with 25, and they will do the same miracles. So it's very difficult to simply say, this is the problem and this is how it is resolved. Even with the lack of resources, we can see how teachers pull out all the stops and they ensure that results have improved time and time again. And I'm talking about real examples where a school is almost falling apart, yet the children are performing. They're not performing because suddenly we had a bright crop of children. They are performing well because the teachers are trying extremely hard. And I agree with Thamsai. It's not about computers and things like that, but certain things do matter. Class sizes, you can't run away from. You can't run away from basic infrastructure. The difference between a mud school that when it rains, everybody's got to come with an extra bucket to catch the water, as opposed to one where we're sitting at a proper desk. These things do matter as well. So context will always play a part.
Yeah. Dr. Thamsai, your take on the question around quality teachers and the poaching that happens there within the education sector?
Well, like I've said and like Basil has just said, it's not about all teachers are quality teachers. How do you differentiate a quality teacher from one that is of a lower quality? I'm not sure how that's done or even possible. But again, it's the context. Sit in a class with 50 or 60 kids and then sit in a class with 20 kids. It's going to be very different. The strategies you are going to use is going to be very different. And I'll give you a simple example. I was a physics teacher at one stage in my life, and I had the privilege of teaching in a public school and a private school. And, in a public school, I would have a class of 43, 44 with limited resources. Now, how do you conduct an aesthetification practical with limited resources and such a big class size? It makes it very difficult. You are constrained with time. You have to finish this really long syllabus, if I can put it that way in very simplistic terms. And what do? You try to do a demonstration. Whereas in a private school, you've got a class of 20, you've got unlimited resource availability. What can you do? You do the same thing, but every child's getting that individualized attention they need. So it's context again. And, in life, people will decide, okay, I prefer private school because I've got a smaller class size. I've got better resources at my disposal. I don't want to have to go through the challenge of sitting in a public or government school of 50 or 60 kids or whatever it may be and limited resources. So it's very, again, it all boils down to the preference of the teacher. It all boils down to the context. And there are a number of factors. And I don't think it would be fair to say that, it is the quality of teachers that are better in a private school as compared to a public school. No, I believe that every teacher that comes out of any HEI is of quality, because your examination process is quality assured, and that would then say point a finger in a negative way at the HEIs to say that they're not doing their job if we're not giving you quality teachers. And I know that is not true.
Could it be an upskilling issue, Doctor?
Perhaps to a certain extent, yes. Professional development is very important, no matter how many years of experience you have in the field. The educational landscape is changing, and therefore we have to keep abreast of the changes that occur. And the only way for us to do that is to upskill ourselves. And if I may use the example, how we taught in 2019 in HEIs, and I'm sure even teachers feel this, the way you taught in 2019 is very different. How you taught in 2020, 2021, and now in a post-pandemic era, how you're teaching is going to be very different. So you have to constantly engage in such professional development.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much to Dr. Thamsai Dhurumraj-Bhadree, who is a Science and Technology Senior Lecturer at the University of Johannesburg, and also NAPTOSA's Executive Director, Basil Manuel. And as we've indicated a bit earlier on, we did invite ISASA, but unfortunately they couldn't do the pre-recorded interview that we agreed to. And we also did invite the Premier of Gauteng, Panyaza Lesufi.